So the goal right now is to try and get this recorded before the heat evaporates from this fucking car because I let it run enough to get a little bit warm in here, and I'm wearing my fleece and my knit cap and everything. I'm in the library parking lot. I would have recorded this in the actual library, but they don't have any soundproofing in the conference rooms and study rooms. So if I tried doing a test one, and I was trying to keep my voice very quiet and even and but I knew as soon as I got more into the flow state, I would be way too animated, and then somebody gonna come knock on my door. I know we've kind of changed from the era of silent libraries, at least here in US America. We've changed a little bit, but it's not a total free for all. Even though we're more public libraries lean more rec center than traditional, silent freaking church like atmosphere. um it's still There's still some kind of decorum you have to have. Anyway, ain't nobody give a fuck about what I'm doing in this car. Let's get into it. The first order of business is, so last night, the 9th, was the 28th anniversary of the Montreal screwjob controversy in the wrestling world that changed the face of kayfabe and just so many other things with wrestling culture forever. I watched Hitman Hart Wrestling with Shadows, the 1998 documentary that's following wrestler Bret Hart, and it leads into the events that go into the Montreal Screwjob. I made a short summing up my thoughts. Y'all might have seen it, and it was basically me saying it was good meta. It was a good companion to Hitman, My Real Life in the Cartoon World of Pro Wrestling, the book that Bret Hart wrote himself that I recommended in a previous video. And the other main thought I had when watching / in my little TikTok short review is, you're never really finished learning about the Montreal Screwjob. No matter how much you think that you've hashed that shit and beat that horse to death, bro, there's always going to be some other little anecdote or lens or piece of color that you weren't aware of. Because it's just, this world is so vast and I'm obsessed with it. The wrestling world, that is. So what the fuck is this screw job anyway? I think the Genius summary that was put on K-Dot's Not Like Us gets the overall gist of this in a good way. Because in Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us, he makes reference to Sweet Chin Music, the finishing move of Shawn Michaels, who is one half of the people involved in the Montreal Screwjob, right? It's Bret versus Shawn. So we're going to find the little description. Come on now. And it's like a whole American Canadian thing. Oh, because it's still on the fucking library Wi-Fi. That's why it's freaking out. Okay. So the line in Not Like Us is, quote, "Sweet chin music and I won't pass the aux, eh?" The Genius annotation. Kendrick Lamar makes reference to legendary WWE wrestler Shawn Michaels, whose signature finishing move is called Sweet Chin Music. The maneuver involves delivering a flat-footed kick to the opponent's chin. Michaels used it to retire famous wrestler Ric Flair at WrestleMania 24 in 2008. Shawn Michaels' greatest opponent was Canadian Bret Hart, both of whom had a legitimate feud, possibly mirroring the disdain that Kendrick and Drake hold for each other. Furthermore, Shawn Michaels was famously part of the controversial 1997 Montreal Screwjob incident. Hart, who at the time held the WWE Championship, had agreed to depart WWE and join rival promotion WCW. Prior to the match, it was agreed that Hart would retain the title against Michaels in front of his hometown crowd. However, Michaels, WWE CEO Vince McMahon, and referee Earl Hebner conspired to, quote, screw Hart and cost him the title. Kendrick refusing to pass the aux, blah, 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 coincides with, that's more talking about Kendrick and Drake's feud, but that's the gist of the screw job, right? Um, if you want a more in-depth thing about it, because there's more layers to it than that, all like the politicking and circumstances that led up to them even thinking this is something that we need to plot against Bret, you should watch Cultaholic Wrestling's like video essay slash documentary about it. Just, oh my gosh. But let me get back to my train, because I just wanted to sum that up so you have a frame of reference for what the fuck, like, what is this bitch talking about? Screw job, if you're not in wrestling world. So, right, I'm a relatively new wrestling fan, as I've hashed out a million times. When I heard of the screw job earlier this year, I wanted to see the actual match first before watching or reading any analysis. So I saw the actual match, and I saw that the ending felt so off. So, like, I think I watched it in May or June, and like, I still had a very rudimentary understanding of like the beats involved in a pro wrestling match and just how shit is supposed to go. But even so, I saw the ending and it was so abrupt and random. And then I see Earl Hebner, the referee, fly the fuck out of that ring after the bell suddenly rings. And I'm like, nigga, what the fuck happened? Yo. And then I immediately found Cultaholic Wrestling's video. And then an obsession was born, because there's so much stuff. It's the fact that Bret had been working, 14 years with very, very little breaks constantly for the WWF. And then I think he had been wrestling prior to that too, you know? So, like, it's a lot. It was all this stuff. And then all he wanted to do was just, you know, transition slowly so that he could be with his kids more. I know his brother, his late brother Owen, at the time before he passed away in a fucking wrestling accident, he was of a similar mind where he was like, yeah, we did the wrestling thing for a hot minute because of our dad and it's family culture and blah, blah, blah. But also, this low-key feels like a prison too, as much as I love it. And I'm not trying to be a prisoner forever, right? And a lot of the prison-like stuff is not just because of how wrestling culture functions in general, but because of how Vince McMahon ran that fucking company. Wrestling is carny shit. People forget it so often, but like even the most ethical promotions, like all the ones that people rave about, at the end of the day, this is still such a crazy activity to be in. It came from carny, swindling culture, you know? It's not a scam inherently, but scammy stuff and just slimy greaseball, you know, mafia ass shit happens in this world. And it's fascinating, and it's also like it can be really intimidating and scary. But, you know, another member of the Tumblr wrestling fandom made their own like post content shit in honor of the screw job. And I thought that their perspective, it gave me another jumping off point to talk about other stuff that's not as like depressing and like melancholy, relating to wrestling. Let me find the fucking Tumblr post. This is from, if my thing is gonna load, this is from user Hitman Click, and it's spelled Kliq, as in the Click group from WWF. I'm gonna say it because today is 28 years since the screw job. Bret Hart is not always bitter. Fans act like they know he's like that all the time. Who wouldn't be when you grow up wrestling and the way you earn respect from your family was being a wrestler or marrying one? When you can no longer do the career you were predetermined to do and actually enjoy the work, it would kill you to not do it because that's all you have. Like the screw job, lost, the kick. This is me paraphrasing, but the kick refers to an injury he had, and failed to realize that Bret was always a quiet person, and being a scary wrestler, you look grouchy. Even now, Bret's stroke is obviously going to permanently change him. It is not out of the realm of opportunity for him to have a resting grouch face because of the stroke. Anyways, I think Triple H and Sean's karma for the screw job planning was going bald. So that shit, I was cracking the fuck up at that post, man. Um, I won't get too into like the Bret is a curmudgeon of it all because that's a whole other conversation. If you're aware of him as a person at all, if you're a wrestling fan, whatever, he's always had a stoic demeanor. But as the years have gone on, people have said he seems really bitter. He's always bitching. He's always bitching. And he is always bitching, but like 9 times out of 10, he has a good reason to bitch. He's been through a lot. That nigga, they worked him to the bone for decades. He's been through like traumatic health stuff, traumatic just family stuff. So if he wants to bitch about how wrestling is conducted and how people are approaching him and conversing with him in light of everything he's been through, you know, let him be. The thing that I wanted to talk about that's more lighthearted is that whole thing where they were like Triple H and Sean's karma for being part of the screw job on Bret was them going bald. Because Bret retained his hair. He's gray now, obviously, because he's like, what, 70, 69, 70. And then Triple H and Sean are younger. Shawn Michaels is like 60, and Triple H, I want to say, is like 55, 56. They're both bald. They bald. And that whole thing, because one, it's funny to think about that being their karma, and two, um it adds to my whole thing of thinking that Bret and Shawn Michaels dynamic mirrors Tony Banks and Phil Collins' dynamic in Genesis. Now, what does Nikki mean by this? Well, the parallels I saw between Tony and Bret as I've been falling down this wrestling rabbit hole, and y'all know I've been a Genesis fan for decades, wrestling is much newer. So they both are wavy slash curly haired brunettes with these like wide smiles and just very pronounced features, right? Pronounced white guy features where you low key look like you're mixed or something. They're stoic slash serious slash veterans. They were known for really innovating, but like staying traditional at the same token. Known for their very, very dry sense of humor, and known for the fact that they couldn't stand their blonde counterpart getting like too much fucking attention. Now, this comes from Bret thinks that Sean, or at least at the time, he thought Sean was getting like too big for his britches in that 90s new generation era of WWF. And to compare that to Tony Banks, I remember in one of the Genesis documentaries, he talked about when Genesis was kind of winding down in the 90s. I remember they had this album in 97 that Phil Collins was markedly not on because he was like in his Disney bag. He was like working on the shit for Tarzan, and then Tarzan became a big phenomenon, and then a few years later Brother Bear and some other stuff he did for Disney was getting big, like, and he was also just in regular acting. I think Phil was in Baywatch. Sean was in Baywatch too. Oh my god. I know Phil was in Miami Vice for sure, but I want to say Phil was in Baywatch as well. But just like the whole thing of that, Tony was like, yo, can we not hear fucking Tarzan every 2 seconds? I don't want to hear this Disney shit. It was so funny. So that's that. And then the last one that was comparing Tony and Bret is the fact that they both kept their hair. So we've like, you have my this one wrestling person I follow saying, yeah, their karma was going bald while Bret kept his hair. Well, I remember in a Genesis this thing, it was like some Hall of Fame shit, like the Prague Awards or something, and Tony Banks, I believe, was being awarded the Prague God Award, and then he was joking about how he was one of the only few from Genesis that still had a considerable amount of hair. So if we shift over to the Phil and Sean comparisons, so they were both long-haired, dirty blondes. They were both loud, outgoing, electric, goofy, just, oh my goodness, the presence they had. The presence, my nigga. The presence. Confident, yet vulnerable, and have a way of striking a nerve. It's like you either love them or hate them. There's rarely in between with these people. That front man energy. And then lastly, going bald. Just going very, very, very bald. And just trying so hard to do comb over and mullet and all this nonsense to retain and hide illusion. But at the end of the day, it's like, girl, just shave it. Like me, I'm someone who deals with alopecia areata, or however you say it, like just alopecia that pops up now and then. Sometimes it'll be little quarter size pieces on my head, and then sometimes, like most recently, it's been like big craters in my hair. And it was pissing me off so much that instead of trying to grow my afro around this big crater in the center of my fucking occipital region, nigga, just shave the hair. It's okay. If it grows back, in my case, theirs was not alopecia. It was just, male pattern baldness. Mine was like hormonal related. So it's not necessarily me going bald right now. But it's okay to go bald. Rock a baldy. Rocking a baldy is so fun. But all those compare and contrast to say, I always thought that what Bret and Tony could have been if there were different 90s circumstances, that's another really poignant point of compare and contrast. Another poignant thing to think about, because so thinking about how Tony, he tried his hand at solo work. It's kind of like how Bret branched off into acting, right? And then Bret's acting, he did some good work. He was in Lonesome Dove and a few respectable things and a few kind of middling things. But, it wasn't bad. And it's the same with Tony Banks. He's done a lot of composition, like orchestral stuff, a la Danny Elfman. But he's also done his own, like, electronic, synth pop kind of stuff where he's the one singing lead. And I like him because he has a unique voice, but at the same time, I totally understand why his voice is not appealing to mainstream audiences. I get why that shit didn't take off. And he did feel some type of way about it not taking off, the way that Phil's solo stuff took off in the 80s and 90s beyond. But c'est la vie, my nigga, c'est la vie. The very last thing is that gay shit. Now, I'm not the first to enjoy gay readings of wrasslin culture, and I'm not going to be the last. And it's just, there are so many things, but I think the thing that I've been thinking about most recently is, in light of that Wrestling with Shadows doc, Stu Hart and Bret Hart's magnetism with people who look up to them makes me insane. Because I feel like it's like so many men have like hero worship crushes on them, but you can very easily just take that a little further and read it like a crush. In the dungeon, aka the basement that the Hart family would use to do all of their stuff, that shit was driving me nuts because so Stu Hart he was known for, he would put aspiring young guys through their paces and put them in all these really painful, like crazy submission holds. And the goal was basically just to see how long people could hold out, or like see if they were able to just like get out of the shit on their own, and just overall kind of have them respect that this is not fake. Just because it's pro wrestling and there's like story beats doesn't mean that there's not potential to hurt people and to get hurt. Like there's an art to this. So I'd read that kind of shit when I was reading Bret Hart's book, but then actually seeing it from old ass Stu putting these young guys through their paces, and it's cool to just see him at work, and it's cool to see like these guys, what, they're probably 20s 30s, looking up to him, but also like the energy, you just hear like screaming and groaning and like, please sir, and it's just I'm sorry, it's Nikki gay pervert hours, I'm sorry. And it's not just me. You talk to Kenny JD, you watch any of her stuff, she's on the same shit. It's not just me. So uh, if you want more of that energy, that leads me into my resource Rex. Check out kismetkayfabe.tumblr.com, my wrestling side blog where I'm fucking unhinged. And also check out these YouTube channels, Cultaholic Wrestling, who had the Screwjob doc that I talked about loving. Wrestling with Wregret. Regret is spelled Wregret. Pun. That guy is really entertaining. Just another wrestling content creator who's not like vapid. He's very in depth, knows his shit, has been around the block. Just fun. And then lastly, because we can't just have it be all white people, we got to have some niggas in here. Wrestling with Color podcast is ran by a black woman. And if you like these vibes here, you would enjoy her channel. The way that I just be shooting the shit, she does a very similar vibe. Hers is more scripted, but it's this kind of conversational style is her jam, and I'm just here for it. I'm here for it. I am praying because I didn't realize I was recording using my Bluetooth headphones that suck, that this doesn't sound terrible. If it does sound terrible, then we're gonna have to upload this tomorrow then after I re-record it. But, thank y'all for rocking with me still. I will see you in the next one.